Hey, this is Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here for another audiobook review. And also, this one is a little bit more of Time Lord Victorious. But just a smidgen, and we're going to get to that. This is going to be one of the things that I'm going to have. I got some negative things to say, some positive things to say. And I really don't know if this deserves to be counted as part of Time Lord Victorious. So what do I mean by that? Well, first off, I found out it was on Audible, and of course I don't have as much time to read. That's why a lot of the Time Lord Victorious stuff that's left is stuff I got to read, and it's taking me a really long time to get through that, because it's all been out for almost a year now. And so the Doctor Who, the Wintertime Paradox, this book comes out, and first I find out that it's on Audible, so I get the Audible version, and then I find out the Audible version doesn't have the story for Time Lord Victorious in it. Now, Audible seems like something that could later be updated. I don't know why they didn't go back and add it. But I'm like, okay, I got to get the print version, because the print version is what on the Time Lord Victorious it has a link to on their website. So I would think guaranteed, and so I order that, and it's back ordered. So I'm waiting for that. And then I read somewhere when I'm frustrated about it not being in the audio and all that, and I'm reading somewhere, and I find out it's not in the physical book either. I just bought this whole thing again in a version that's back ordered that isn't going to have what I need. So it's only available on the Kindle downloadable version. So the digital Kindle version is the only place where you can get the Time Lord Victorious story. And I guess originally BBC gave it out for free as a newsletter, which you can get a hold of, so you don't even need to purchase it, but I didn't figure that out until after I had purchased it on Kindle. So, yeah, I've purchased 3 versions of this, and so far it's one of my lower liked things in the Time Lord Victorious thing, and but that's not so much. So let's talk about the audiobook, or the book overall. It's written by Dave Rudin and published by the BBC Children Books. So that right off the bat tells you this is going to be more kiddie than some of the other Doctor Who content. And it doesn't break any new ground. You can be kiddie and not and still have interesting thoughts, but I will say it did have a few that I enjoyed. But let's talk about the narration. Sophie Aldred did the narration, and I have not listened to any of her other stuff. She has a pretty nice voice. Nothing wrong with her voice. However, this book, each story is a different Doctor, and it all kind of takes place in wintertime, and a lot around the holidays and that kind of stuff. I can't distinguish which Doctor is which, and it was like she did some research, because the 8th Doctor definitely had kind of like the right accent, but she did one that was the 10th Doctor, and then she did one that was the 9th Doctor. I still thought it was the 10th Doctor. And then she did one as the 11th Doctor, and I still thought it was the 10th Doctor. And then she did something, and I'm like, wait a second, is that the 11th Doctor? And she did one as the 4th Doctor that I actually thought was the 9th Doctor. So, you know, not saying that I necessarily could do better, but compared to some of the other things, I almost would have rather she just read it and not tried to do the Doctor's voice, because it got very confusing. And the book did not do a very good job of identifying which one is which. And it doesn't state, like at the beginning, this is a 8th Doctor story, this is a 10th Doctor story. It doesn't do that. And it's kind of in the writing a little bit, like it kind of does it. But because she's kind of doing impersonations of some of the Doctors, you're going off of that. And then when some of them don't match the Doctor, like when you look it up online and go, oh, this is that's a 12th Doctor story? Well, that didn't sound like the 12th Doctor at all. That sounded like David Tennant. That throws you. That throws you big time. But like I said, her voice is pleasant. It's 9 hours and 50 minutes. Most of the stories weren't super compelling, but there were a few standout ones. There was one that had Missy in 1909 solving murders. And this is taking place during the time when the Doctor is on the planet with River Song and Missy is bored. It's like, he's off doing this with River Song, and instead of paying attention to her, and she's been trying to be better, so she decided she's going to get herself a companion. And she's, I guess, been going through doing this a number of times. And so she finds this sheriff, or not this detective that's really super lazy, and he gets fired, and she keeps prodding him to solve these murders, and that her solving of the murders will get him his job back, get him fame, all that kind of stuff. And so she thinks she's going to better his life and all this kind of thing. And he'll be her human pet, and she's going to go on these adventures with him. And he's really, really super dull. She is basically leaving him breadcrumbs to all the murders, clues, and he's got nothing. He has no investigative skills. How did he ever become an investigator? I don't know. It turns out, spoiler alert, spoilers, Missy was killing the people. Missy's why he lost his job. She's everything about it is Missy. And you find out, well, Missy lost her job, and then she had to kill all those people that did the job with her because they backstabbed her. And at the end, she's pinning all the murders on this guy's boss that fired him, so that he can kill him and claim it was self-defense and prove all of this evidence that he's responsible for all these murders, and come in, not only get his job back, but get fame and glory and be head of the department. But he's not able to. He won't do that. And and then he does. He does almost on accident. Or no, he misses, I think, and so she kills him, and all in all, she ends up killing this companion of hers. You know, she's kind of like, oh, you disappoint me. Why do you have to disappoint me? Now I gotta kill you. None of you ever live up. And she's basically trying to see what the Doctor sees, and these people have these humans to keep her amused. But she's the master. She's twisted. She's evil. So even though she thinks she's being good, like, she's going to improve this guy's life. She's going to do all this. She's going to help him. She's going to this, whether it's thieves or a detective or all that. But she's playing detective, and she's the one that committed the murders. So it was a fun story. Davros and the Doctor. This was just kind of an interesting concept of the Doctor calling Davros out for a truce, Christmas after Christmas, taking him to a place to see a show where they just sit down and have conversations. And the Doctor changes which Doctor it is over the course of this. Just really interesting back and forth conversation. Nothing exceptional, just really interesting back and forth conversation. There's one that's called, typical me, I don't have editing here, Feed You to the Trees. This is with the Seventh Doctor. This is one where they actually get his accent and mannerisms kind of down good. I knew it was the Seventh Doctor. It had a kind of an interesting twist. You know, these people were sacrificing people to the trees. Was machines or whatever designed to terraform the planet had gone haywire, and the Doctor ends up resetting it, solves the issues, but it was just, it had a little bit of a more interesting concept. The rest of them were pretty run-of-the-mill. Would have been like, well, I guess that's okay as an episode type thing of Doctor Who, but would never be an episode that anybody would point to or talk about as a great episode. They were just kind of there. They were kiddie. You know, probably worthy of being a Sarah Jane Adventures show. You know. So then there's the Time Lord Victorious one. So this is the last one I'm going to talk about, Canaries. Once Upon a Dark Time. And it sees a museum curator who has a museum of items from alternate timelines. An exhibit of these items that can't exist but do exist. So money made from a mint that doesn't exist, products made from a company, manufactured, sealed, everything on it, that company never existed. Stuff like that. And these are things that basically fell through the cracks of time when the Doctor was messing with time in the dark times, kind of warping and mixing around that. And all the while, she keeps getting phone calls from the Doctor telling her she's got to get rid of these things. She's got to give it to him because it's not safe having all those things there. Having all of these out-of-time things together could cause a breach. She's got a sign on the door that says, "No time travelers welcome." Just at a random, because she doesn't want this guy on the phone to come. So the Doctor keeps calling her. Different iterations of the Doctor are calling her randomly over the years, always seemingly calling her when he's in the middle of some giant battle with like Cybermen or Daleks or whatever going on, sometimes, you know, whatever's going on in the background. And he picks that as the time to have phone conversation with her, and then he has to go. And then in the end, it is the curator from the 50th anniversary calls her. He says, "I've become a bit of a curator myself. It's that I understand, but it's imperative this will happen. And for whatever reason, there's some reason why this individual wants this rip and other stuff from other realities. Maybe she lost somebody and she knows it. What she desperately is hoping this is going to call something, and then something does come through, and it's scary, and it's that, and it's all, and then it ends. No satisfying conclusion. We don't know what happens. Why the Doctor would call her dozens of times and never just fly his TARDIS in and actually scoop up the items. He totally could go just TARDIS in, scoop up one, materialize over each item one at a time, pick him up. He's fully capable of it. He's letting decades go by. Finally, the bad thing he says happens. And then we don't get to see if the Doctor fixes it. We don't get to see what happens to this lady. It was kind of an interesting concept of, like, this lady runs a museum of all these things that the Doctor has curated over the years, and that was kind of interesting. Having it end that way was not so interesting. Having this kind of be like, well, this is the true end of the Time Lord Victorious. This is just something, remnants of the events of the Time Lord Victorious, and this is how it all came out. So, as a Time Lord Victorious, not great. As an audiobook, not great. It's a hardbound book to read some Doctor Who to your kids, to be kind of like an early Doctor Who book for maybe like preteens. I'm thinking like it's probably good for like 8 to 12-year-olds. I think it's a good book for that. As an adult, most of the stories are that. So if you're flipping, the Kindle version is probably the best version to get. And, just know that out of the dozen stories in it, that, about a third of them are going to be worth your attention as an adult. Nothing's bad. Nothing's like, oh, wow, whoa, that's a horrible. But they're just not great. But as a kid's book, it's good. But as a Time Lord Victorious tie-in, no. Find the PDF from their website online. It's readily available. You just have to search it. It's Canaries. It's a short story. Do that. Read that as part of your Time Lord Victorious. Because it's an interesting little story. It does leave you at the end on a cliffhanger, but it's an interesting enough story. But with that in mind, don't go buy this book just for that. It's not worth it for that. If you're thirsty for more Time Lord Victorious, this is not going to satisfy you in that way. It's ribbon threaded tied to that. And it's more like a callback. Hey, remember that thing that happened type thing. It has nothing to do with the actual plot of Time Lord Victorious. So, with that, if you got children, you want a book to read to them, good book. Otherwise, I would probably pass on this one. And that's probably the first audiobook that I've given book that I've given that review to. All right. I'll see you all in the next video.